So Karyn, as we get ready to start, first and foremost, I just want to say thank you for being here, for saying yes. I kept seeing your name, kept seeing that you were on here, and I've always respected you as just this powerful leader and what you stand for. And you're like, oh my goodness, do I get to? Yes, you get to. And then it was like, what are we going to talk about? So before we jump into just your topic, just a little bit about Karyn. So you've been with Caesars for over 15 years.
Yeah, 15.
Started off as a project manager, you went into a project director, and you've been the vice president of design and development for Caesars Entertainment Las Vegas. And, I'm just curious. So how did that happen? Especially most of that I look at as in a man's world. Was it difficult to transition into that?
This is going to sound interesting. So I started as a project manager with an engineering background, and I thought, what the heck, we'll try interviewing with this company, Harrah's. Honestly, I'd never heard of Harrah's. Didn't know it was a casino per se at first. Had to look it all up, and I don't know. I would say I worked hard. I asked a lot of questions, figured it all out. And honestly, the transition to director, a lot of people have said happened a little later than they thought it should have. And I never really thought about it because I loved what I was doing. It was exciting. I loved communicating with people. I loved challenges every day. So I think that the leading of the projects was one thing. The harder step was when my boss at the time, Greg Miller, said, hey, I think I want you to step in and become the vice president. There were two of us, and that came in together. And I was like, I don't know. That's like it's a different mindset, like managing a project and the moving parts and all those pieces versus managing the people, managing the projects. That was probably the more difficult step, because you don't necessarily get the leadership training, especially coming from the engineering world. Things are very black and white, calculations, numbers, to managing people. But after I got into that role for probably 6 months to a year, I really started to love it and realizing it was a great platform to help grow people.
Well, so you're such a people person. Like, you are such a people person. How did you ever get into the engineering world? Like, who introduced you to that?
Gosh, that's a good question. Well, I think in high school, I remember wanting to be in the medical career, either, doctor probably, and then more of because of the science side. I loved science. It was more like the medical testing. And I don't know exactly what flipped in my brain. My father owned an excavating company. I used to dig holes in the backyard with the heavy equipment, and that's what I did for fun. And I never put two and two together that could be my career. I think I always said I was going to own a business when I grew up. And then I watched my dad work way too many hours and said, maybe it's better to work for someone else. But I think that's what it was, like thinking, I like this construction side. What would be something I could go into? And that's how I chose civil engineering, and went to University of Buffalo. It was kind of in my backyard, but still far enough away that I was away. And so that's really, I guess, how it happened.
And then how long have you been in Vegas?
We've been in Vegas 15 years. I moved here for the job with Caesars.
Okay. And that's a huge transition alone, just from New York to Las Vegas.
Yeah, love the weather. When we first got here, I think we were outside all the time because we're like, it's a beautiful day, the sun's out. The next day, it's a beautiful day, the sun's out. We realized about a month in. Yeah.
115 is still a beautiful day and the sun's out.
Yes. So I think that transition was not as difficult as I thought it would be, just because I love being outdoors. I'm like, I can run outside all year. There's no slush. You don't have to plow the driveway every day in the winter anyways. It's like, it was a totally different mindset, but I loved it.
Yeah. So your topic, leading from the bench, what inspired that topic? What does it mean to you?
So the topic was 100% inspired by Abby Wambach's book, Wolfpack. And I got married by it too, because I said, this is awesome. It's really an easy read. In fact, the other night I couldn't sleep. I read the whole book in the middle of the night again. So she spoke a lot about leading from the bench, and listening to it from her voice and trying to feel like, hey, Mary, what do I want to talk about? I realized being the leader, being the captain of a team, and then having to be on the bench, and even recognizing, in her case, she recognized with her coach that she probably needed to sit on the bench for that last US World Cup game. Because she was older, and she realized on the bench, she gave it her all. She was yelling, cheering for the team. That's when she realized being on the bench is just as important a role as actually being out there on the field and being a captain. And I started thinking, Mary's like, well, what are you passionate about? And I'm like, the last year, I don't know, making it through the day. It's been a pretty rough year with COVID. Caesar's going through a merger, and I don't know, it was just the book and the thinking about sitting on the bench, which I told Mary, maybe that's too strong of a term, but it's definitely how it feels when you go from being a VP for the whole country to being the VP for just a region, and feeling guilty, like, oh my gosh, why should I feel bad about that? That's pretty fantastic to still be the VP of the region. It just felt like a step back, like you were being set on the bench. And it had nothing to do with my work ethic, right? It's a merger, it's COVID, there's things out of my control. And so that's really where that topic came from, just thinking, how do you get the message out that it's okay to be happy, even though others are sad and hurt? Like, it's okay to be happy about yourself, I should say. It's okay to feel for the people that aren't, in the same roles they were, people that you had to lay off. It was a pretty rough period. And I'm sure a lot of people in the world have gone through it, either having to do the layoffs or being someone who was laid off or furloughed and sitting home, which literally is like sitting on the bench, and still trying to motivate them and not allowing yourself to grieve or feel how horrible it is to have to do that task because you're so worried about everyone else and how they feel. So I think there were months and months and months of, like, I forgot to feel for myself because I was really like there for the team and trying to do everything I could to keep them feeling positive and motivated, even though it was a really crummy time. And a lot of people are afraid to talk about it. I don't like being negative, and I don't necessarily look at this as a negative. I look at it as reality. And I don't think it's good to keep things inside when you feel that way. But I also think it's okay to acknowledge that you do feel that way. Like, I think, does that answer your question, Mary? I know it's a little roundabout, but
No, and you and I were actually just talking about that emotions are there for a reason. And so many times we're taught it's not okay to be angry. It's not okay, suck it up, shake it off. And yet at the same time, emotion is there to teach us, to show us that either something's off or a need isn't being met. So it's okay to feel that. It's what we do with that feeling, and I love the analogy, what Abby was sharing about the bench. And I was thinking too, because I had to read the book when you were talking about it, when you go after your role, when you work so hard for who you are, what you want, where you become in life, and all of a sudden things shift.
yeah.
And she was the one in the book, she said herself and the coach, they talked about it, and she agreed to pull herself out. And we have this identity that, wait, no, I'm a player, whether it's in sports, whether it's in business, I'm a player. I'm a captain. I'm the one that's running the ship. And when you recognize and realize that what you bring to the table, there's someone else that has so much stronger talent or fresh and new ideas, and it's how do you not take that personally? And then to see her shift and say, I'm going to be the best bench team member ever, to where the coach sat her at the other side of the bench because she was so loud. And when I think about this, we work with a lot of sports, college sports, and a lot of the coaches say, I just want my players to be able to be the best bench player. And it's not, everyone has a role, and sometimes it's more of a support role versus the one that's out in front. And so when you were talking about that and being that VP, and you alluded to, and for those of you who don't know, Caesars went through this huge merger. So this was even prior to COVID. And then it's in COVID and everything changes.
Yeah.
So what were some of your emotions? What was going through your mind?
Well, it was tough because COVID hit first. We were already in the merger discussions. They got slowed down because of COVID, but it's going through the phase of, we need to furlough people. We need to figure out how to conserve cash quickly, which the whole world was trying to figure out. What do we do? How do we do this? And how do we keep, in my mind, it was like, how do I keep the most people active, but while being sensitive to the fact that if you don't take the leap fast enough, then you might bankrupt the whole company. Like that was probably the bigger mindset. My team obviously went bankrupt the company, but just the thought process of, we're doing this for the greater good for the whole of the company versus thinking so much about just your specific team. So what went through my mind, furloughing is difficult when it's like, you should be coming back. I mean, that's kind of what furlough means. We're going to take a little break and then come back, and, telling everyone pack up and work from home for a few weeks, which turned into over a year.
Here.
Like that was tough. And then calling everyone to tell those that were furloughed and then making more cuts. Like I think the emotional part was like, you want to cry, but you need to be strong for them. It's like that, I think, is what I went through. Like I almost feel like I lost who I was for a little while because you had to turn all the emotion off. Still be there, still know, hey, I'm here supporting you. But by the way, you need to go home and not work for, we don't know how long. And then getting the calls throughout COVID, the merger still, who knows? And then even once the merger goes through, thinking, well, what does that mean? And trying to bring a team together post-merger when you're all working remote. There were a lot of negative feelings. There were a lot of sad feelings. There was a lot of anger. There were definitely the moments where it's like, I could do better. Maybe I need to go somewhere else. Then the moments where I'm like, what are you saying? You've told your whole team, you hold it together, it's going to be better. It's just going to take time. Life is about change, and you grow when things are uncomfortable, and change will make things different, but maybe that difference better. You just have to get through the not so good periods. So I think I took the anger. I was honest. I've talked to my new leaders and I'm honest with them when I'm like, I don't like this. It's okay. You don't have to like it. You have to figure it out, but you don't have to like it. And I was honest. And so I think that that's really how I got through it. It's honesty, and it's being able to acknowledge, this is how I feel, and maybe putting yourself out there that not everyone can go to their leadership and say, I don't like where you're putting me. I don't like this, right? Like really, it's just, it doesn't feel comfortable. I feel like I'm being demoted, and them saying, well, we're not demoting you. We're just trying to figure out how to restructure the whole group. I think that's what was important to me, that I made sure they understood how I felt. And I didn't just bury that, because if you bury it, then one day you blow up, and maybe that's the day you say, I'm out. And that's not really the right answer always. Like for some people it is. I think someone once told me, when you're waking up in the morning to go to a job and it's no fun anymore, and you're literally like dragging yourself there, that might be the moment where it's time to make a change. But when you're still excited about where a company has to go and how much growth is still available and all the positive things, and maybe even thinking, hey, it's tough on me. Imagine how tough it is on the other side. So kind of maybe it's that emotional side, putting yourself on the other side's shoes. So getting through your own sadness, anger, guilt for still having a position that's fantastic and that you still love, but having to acknowledge that it's changed, and not going like down the rabbit hole of, this sucks, and still being positive and motivating. So I think those were all the emotions.
Well, and you mentioned that too when you and I spoke a couple of weeks ago, is that there was a lot of guilt because you had a job where people were losing their jobs. And even though it didn't look like it had before, yet you still were working. And, I heard a lot of that with people who were essential business, that when people were losing, things were being shut down and they didn't have finances coming in and so much fear, there was all this guilt that was happening with people who still got to work.
Yeah.
So, and I just want to ask this question because I know a lot of people, who are watching this, who watch it later, there's an element when we look at people in leadership and there's all these different changes. So you have to lay people off, you have to furlough people, and you have to take the emotion out. Is there still a piece of you underneath that feels? And then how do you deal with that?
Oh, well, the first one is hard. I think you just deal with it you just have to do it. It's almost, I guess the other way of looking at it is you don't really protect anyone by not being honest with them. So the best thing you can do is just be completely honest and keep them informed. I think that was the most important thing, to make sure they understood. It has nothing to do with your performance, which is a little bit easier than, the hard conversations, which are like, you're just not performing. So where is yourself? I think you have to, I think I had to kind of block that out for a little moment, the actual emotion of it, still be very positive, but I think you just get through it. I wish I could give some like concrete advice on how you do it, but just realizing it's not your fault. And the best you can do is communicate, let them talk, let them grieve, and just be there for them.
When I think about leading from the bench and I see a coach, right? And I see a coach with you. So it's not just the player, right? You're out playing and you're that star, leading from the bench could also be that coach. You have to coach all the players. So you're not the one that's like, we're going to charge the hill. It's like, how do I empower the people around? And sometimes you do have to sit some of your star players out, but they still have such a key role in support.
Yeah.
So talk to us about how you teach your team how to support each other.
I think I had a very close team. So one of the biggest things that came out of this whole thing were the number of people that I had to lay off that actually said, thank you. This was a special time in my life. And we feel like we'll never be on a team that's quite as cohesive because we created almost a family atmosphere. And so I think the way I taught them, or the way that we taught each other really is the right answer, is we were always there for each other. Like, I'm not the type of leader to yell at someone when they make a mistake. I might let them know that I'm let down. And honestly, like the pain, I think, or the emotion of feeling like you've let someone down is almost worse. Like if someone yells in my face, I'm just gonna be like, forget it, boom, bounces right off. But if you actually show me that I've upset you, that's probably the way I respond more. But my team all stood up for each other. And, I had twice weekly Zoom calls with the members that weren't on furlough. I called and checked in on everybody, and they checked up on each other. And I think that is a testament to the open environment we created, because having a team with even one toxic person on it can definitely destroy the whole perspective, the whole culture. I just felt like we had something so special that even in these hard times, everybody was there for each other. Do you need groceries delivered? Think about the heat of COVID. There were some people that were legit like afraid to even go get food. And others that were like, I'll go do it for you. And I really think that's how we got through it for each other. They were there for me when I needed it just as much as I was there for them. And just helping them understand it's unknown. I don't know either, but that I will be your biggest cheerleader when it's time to keep us all together. And sometimes you win and sometimes you lose, and then you just have to move on.
So how do you deal with someone? So you have a great team, and things happen, and change rocks people world. I mean, it's not just COVID, like it change in general. So a merger, the acquisition, it creates all these fears, all these unknowns. Yeah. So how do you work with someone who becomes toxic? So you have the strong team and you have that one person.
Well, what's interesting and what I found on our team is the few people that were a little bit toxic. And when I say toxic, just maybe they would say something that was the ripple effect and the whole office would respond. They kind of weeded themselves out because they didn't necessarily belong in the culture. They didn't fit. And I think that those things kind of work themselves out. I think the other way you deal with it is you just have to constantly be positive with them, because eventually they either come around or they realize I don't fit. So that's how you deal with toxic. And you have to be honest and talk to them. I think it's sitting someone down and saying, when you said this to this individual, it really upset them and it impacted the way their whole day was. And I think the other thing we teach a lot to our team members is remember that work isn't everything to them. So you don't know if they have something horrible going on at home. By the time they got in the office, they were already angry. Maybe there's a little road rage going on with traffic. Like, you just don't know where someone's mindset is. And then you might feel like the one thing you said to that person threw them off, when the reality is it was just the last thing and they were just done. So I think it just goes back to that emotional side that a lot of people don't think about, the emotional intelligence and being able to read and be empathetic for others. So,
did you ever play sports?
I did. I played soccer since I was a little girl. Gosh, I want to say like 5 years old. So I played soccer my whole life. When I got a little bit older, I played basketball to stay in shape, and I ran track. So I think I told you this because I know soccer was like life. Soccer, you don't lose. Like you just didn't. And if you lost, it was like terrible. Well, then I was on a basketball team, and I don't know if it's just the different mindset, but we lost our games, but I was still like, guys, we're strong. We're awesome in our hearts. We can do this. And we go out there and we have more heart. And we lost every game. but I used to send notes to the team coach who knew me. He knew it was me because he knew my voice. He was the English teacher. And it was like, guys, we're awesome. It was like, never quit. Like, how it's easy to play in a team that wins. It's easy to be a bench warmer on a team that wins because you get all that excitement, all the positive energy. I think I probably learned more on the team that was losing, because it makes you realize that you have to have something else in your gut that says, I'm going out there, even though I'm losing, and we're not going to quit, and we're not going to pout. We're going to just do it. We're going to, we're going to play. And that bonded us all together. And then track, interestingly enough, is like a sport, on the relay team, you're a group, but for the most part, it's an individual sport. So I think all three of those combined made me who I am. They also helped me like understand, I think all people, all kids, all children, sports teach you a heck of a lot more than just the sport and just the athleticism. Of course, staying in shape, taking care of your body, those are all great things, but it teaches you the teamwork. It teaches you being a captain, being a leader. It teaches you being a helper. It teaches all sorts of things, and it keeps you out of trouble because you're busy. And I think the more you have on your plate, sometimes the more efficient you are at getting it all done. So playing sports, for me, it's kind of, I can equate most of what happens even in the business world, think in my head, what would this mean on a true sports team, and try to relate that to the business world.
I love how you said you wrote notes and to the coach, so the coach would read it to the team. And that really shows the true power of leading from the bench. It's not just, it's my voice, it's my way. It really becomes about the team. And adversity makes great teams. And I always say, if we lived on the mountaintop, that's where it's fun. That's where we're winning. And there's some magic in this flow when we're winning. Yet what we really learn is the characteristics of what really creates a great team, whether it's in business, or sports, in life in general. When the crap hits the fan, like, how do you show up? How do you rally? What do you do? How do you support? Do I really have heart? Do I have empathy? Come on, kid, let's go.
Yeah.
And I love it. And your husband he played professional soccer as well.
That's correct. He did. So that's actually how we met. Playing soccer. He kicked me in the stomach in an indoor game when he was staying in shape in the in the off season. And like, long story short, we've basically been together ever since. So yeah, soccer is like just part of our life. And now all three of our kids play, and I think it's great. It's good to teach them. Like, I realized through COVID, not having soccer, or not having, take any sport, take any activity, take summer camps, whatever you want to call it, the kids staying home, it's really easy for them to just sit around and like, what do you do with them when they don't have like activity upon activity to do? One of the silver linings I found through COVID, yeah, it was terrible they weren't at sports, but guess what? We as a family had so much time together that we normally wouldn't have. Like, we could just sit and talk. And it wasn't like, I'm rushing to this field, well, you rush to that field and you coach over there. Like, there wasn't that chaos. And there was that moment of like, wow, this is kind of nice to just sit and be a family together. So
how do you lead, or what would your suggestion be for people leading from the bench? Like, what does that mean in the business world?
Well, in the business world, I think leading from the bench would be, it's not even necessarily on the bench. It's that person who sits quietly in their office all day doing their job, but then recognizing that someone's down and taking that step to go and speak to them when it's like totally out of their character and probably out of their comfort zone. It's acknowledging, like, maybe when, if your leader's having a bad day, and taking that step in to say, hey, what's going on? I know this isn't the way you usually are. Sometimes just one person saying, are you okay? I'm here for you, is all you need. And to know that, like, everyone on my team, if I asked them for something at any given time, they would make sure that it happened no matter what. But that's what makes us as leaders strong. It's the people on our team, and it's not just the ones that are the star players. It's the one doing all the work behind the scenes, the ones that never get the credit, nor do they want it. They like it that way. They like working all night long, whatever it takes to get something done, and they never want the credit for it. So I think in a business world, that's kind of what it's like, leading from the bench. I think it could be a shift in your career. It could be, it could be so many things. It's not necessarily just you personally, it's the people on your team. But when you personally are feeling down, it's taking that anger and spinning it around to something positive and supporting your team and not giving up on them. I think that was the biggest thing that crossed my mind now that you say it. During the COVID and the merger, was like, it would be so easy to move on and do something else, but I would be leaving them behind. And there was no chance I was doing that. They made some pretty good offers if you wanted to get out before the merger. I would never do that, because I felt like my team was there. like their mom, right? Like we're like a family. You don't leave people behind. You're there and you support them. And maybe that's not the right decision from a full business perspective, but how do we all value ourselves, and what do we value as being successful in life? Is it working 90 hours a week and making this huge paycheck and having zero time with your family? Or is it going to work and doing something you love every day and being there for each other? Like everyone's different in what motivates them.
When you were just talking, the analogy that Abby in her book, she said, you're either rushing or you're pointing. So
Yeah.
as that great leader, if you're not the one scoring the play, so to speak, if you're not the one that's out in front making it happen, you're rushing that person, giving them high fives, supporting, cheering them on. Or if you're the one that makes that play, then you point to the rest of the people. And that's what I see you as, is that you're rushing them and you're pointing them. It's never just about you. It's how do I bring the rest of my people with me? Because that's what great leaders do. In times of change and challenge, human nature is to look for the path of least resistance. And so if there's an easy way out, I remember my father worked for Boeing years and years ago, and he was offered the golden handshake. And it's like that, here's the way out. But if you have this belief in your team, if you have a belief in the vision, no matter how hard it is, it still is, it's all for one and one for all. And you don't leave them behind.
Yeah. Yeah. And you don't, the toxic talk is a real thing, especially in a merger, because it's real easy for a leader on the other side of the merger, like we were, to take the other stance than what I did. I said, this is going to be fantastic. We're all going to be great. It's going to take some time, but it's going to be better. There were probably other people, in similar circumstances that would have created this huge divide before the merger ever even happened, or, whatever it might be that maybe it's just two companies, it could be any companies combining forces. Cultures are going to be different, but you as a leader create that. Even none of us knew what was really going to happen, but a team, someone saying it's going to be okay, we're going to get through this together, and someone else who's like creating the negative talk about the other side. How do you ever respect the leadership when it's been talked up by your leader that they're terrible? So
there's that quote that either you create the culture or the culture creates you. And as a leader, we have a responsibility to create that culture that we want. And again, it starts with us, right? It's the looking in the mirrors, looking internally, saying, wait a minute, what do I believe? What do I want? Am I walking my talk? Am I empowering people, or am I the one that's putting, the fester and the wounds and making it just raw? Because if you start to look around at the culture that you have, if you have the negative naysayers and you have people that are just sabotaging, it falls back on the shoulders of the leader. And it's like, wait a minute, what am I doing? Am I being the light, or am I being the dark, so to speak?
Yeah, it's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And you can make a choice.
So in Abby's book, she talks about the wolf pack and where that whole analogy came from. Do you want to talk about that, the whole TED Talk and the wolves? Do you remember that, what she was talking about?
We could, but let me start before we go there. That the wolf pack was introduced to me by Caesars, by the way. So we have women's lean-in circles, and we listened to her talk about the wolves. So it's kind of our internal thing as well. So that's what I love. It's kind of like our secret little power that we were all a part of this wolf pack. And yeah, so her speech about the wolves and the way she starts the book out is fantastic, because she talks about how she was asked to give a speech to the Barnard School graduates, all women's school. And here she's like, I never even went to college. And she was open and honest about that in the book. And the story about the wolves, oh gosh, so there's the land is getting devastated because they took all the wolves out of the forest, and nothing's keeping the deer population, I guess, basically intact. So the deer are eating everything in sight. The streams are eroding. And so as soon as they introduced the wolves back in, the land was able to heal itself, because that's the natural process. And the power of the wolf isn't just the lone wolf. It's the fact that all of them were out there doing their jobs, and we're able to turn that around. So I probably really butchered that, but
no, that's the concept of it, right? Is that what was destroying, what they thought was destroying, they took it away. And, that's in life. When we look at some, oh, this is destroying us. This is the hard thing. We want to cap it. We want to stop it. Yet what they realize is if they actually introduce the wolf pack together, there was a purpose for the hardship, that everything has a reason. And those wolves actually helped control the deer population, which allowed the whole ecosystem to flip. And when we look at the wolves, right? And we all have that part of that wolf in us. And when we come together and we work within our strengths and not like our weaknesses, so to speak, but our strengths, it creates this beautiful harmony in life.
Yeah. And it was great how she saw that, and that's what she developed the whole speech around, was a National Geographic video.
I know the TED Talk. I love it. I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing, because you never look at that. It's like, it goes back into adversity. So many times people want to stop adversity. We just want it to go away. Yet it's in adversity that heals us. It's in adversity that we have new ideas, new ways of being. It's actually ways of healing, but we're at choice.
Yeah. So
this last year, what was your greatest obstacle?
What was my greatest obstacle? I mean, I think it was the merger, and I don't necessarily call it an obstacle. I think it was a growth moment, but I think it was an obstacle because there's so many things. Like, I'm about, let's get things done. Let's improve processes. Let's do things better. And then all of a sudden, the analogy back to sports, it's like, you get a new coach and you're playing a sport, but you don't know the rules anymore. You're trying to work, you don't have the right tools, you don't have the plays, and you're still trying to stay positive. So I would have to say that, but I also think that if you ask me the same question next year, I think it'll be totally different, because by then I think the team will have gelled and we'll know the rules and we'll know how to pass to each other, because we, innately start to learn how we all work together in this new environment. And the new environment's much more, I think, overarching. It's much more family-like. It's much more like the team spirit that we created in my old team. But that's the overall culture of the corporation. And that's very different, because I think every department in a giant corporation like Caesars is going to have their own culture. And what's important is that we all, I think, together can have that culture. And it's going to take time. But once it comes together, I think you'll see some very fantastic things coming out of Caesars, more so than you've already done.
I feel it's like an analogy of a team that's together and all of a sudden they have a new coach.
Yeah.
And you still have the same team, but now you have a new coach and you have to work within the rules and their leadership style. Yet the people haven't changed. And so it's just figuring out how to gel and play within those rules again.
Yeah.
What was your greatest lesson?
Greatest lesson that I'm stronger than I think I am. Not to be so hard on myself, especially for things that are completely out of my control. And maybe even to accept help, which is hard sometimes. But yeah, I think it's that I was stronger than I thought I was when I got to the other side of it. I think in the middle of all of the chaos and furloughs and, layoffs, which dragged out for, I think it was like 6 months, getting to the other side and realizing made it through emotionally. It's draining, and it's hard to stay upbeat and positive when you're making a lot of hard decisions, and not even necessarily decisions that were your own. When you're given, here's a number of people, it's soul destroying at times. It's like, it's hard. So I think that was the hardest part.
Oh, that was weird. We have some feedback coming on here.
Oh.
So I'm actually going to open it up for anyone who's on here listening. And I see some comments on Facebook. If you have questions for Karyn, we would love to bring those live and have her answer your questions. I have Chris Rowe who says he's watching. Looking good. Meredith says you're a great leader, Karyn. You did an awesome job through everything, even though I know it was hard. Yeah.
And it's hard for everyone. So I think I'm here talking because I said to Mary, some people are afraid to talk about the hard things, and you either want to put on that front that you're so strong, nothing bothers you, it all bounces off. Meanwhile, I think people are making decisions about their lives without fully feeling it or without realizing it might be a brash decision and they haven't given it enough thought. I think sometimes we take things super personal. Like if someone's not talking to you, you might think they're not talking to me, they're not coaching me, they're not leading me because I'm doing something wrong. When the reality is maybe they're leaving you alone because you're doing everything right. So that's why I think it is so important that we tell our teams and our leaders, you're doing a great job. I'm here. I see you. Even if it's just a quick hi, like COVID's been tough because we're separate, but how hard is it if you're sitting there smoldering in your own anger, and it might be over something that's totally in your own head. And then you make a career change that maybe wasn't the right thing for you because you feel like you don't have a seat at the table. And some people didn't have a seat at the table, and I'm not going to go there. That's a totally different story. But for those that did make it through, I think that, making sure you don't take something personal that has nothing to do with it. It might have, you have to talk, you have to be open, you need to communicate. And if you don't, and you let that smolder, you might be so upset and ruining months and maybe years and years of your life over something that might have been totally in your head. Yeah.
There's that saying, assumptions are the termites of a relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we say what is one of our cultural sayings is basically like, don't assume bad, assume good intentions always. Sometimes the way things come off are not the way they were meant to be. So don't always assume that somebody says something and it's because it's in a negative connotation. Maybe they meant it very positive and you took it negative, and it totally blows something up that didn't need to be that way. And it's not easy to always assume positive intent, but it's way easier than to always assume that the sky's falling around you.
Yeah. So in regards to just your topic, leading from the bench, what advice, and I know you talked touched on a little bit, but what advice could you give to people right now who are just like they're feeling a little lost? Maybe their roles have shifted. They're figuring out just this new way of being.
Yeah, I did touch on it for sure. I think the right answer is communication. Don't assume anything. Talk to your new leader. If you're in a company that's merged, talk to your old leader, talk to someone that you no longer work for. Like, I think communicating, understanding you're not alone, realizing it's okay to feel bad inside, but that it's not okay to just give up and think that that's going to somehow make it better. Or to jump because you're afraid of what might be versus excited about how great things could be. So communication, I will say, like, the heart and soul of almost everything is communication. If you feel something, say it. Don't blast it out. Speak in a human manner. It's easy to be like, I'm mad at you, and I do. You can ask my husband, I do that. But at work, I'm super calm usually, and it's like, if you have a problem, let's talk about it, because burying it and not discussing it makes it worse. So communication, talk about it. Talk about how you feel. Don't come and cry in an office. Come in and say, this is how I feel. How can we make this better? That would be my advice.
Okay. As a leader, what do you do to keep yourself in a healthy mindset? Like, what are some of the routines? What are some of the things that you do to fill up so that you can give out?
This is one that we didn't even talk about, but I just thought of it. You got me into writing in my journal every day. And I'm not doing it. This is not an advertisement for Mary, but I love this journal. It actually got me started, and I'm not consistent. Like, let's be real. Sometimes I write once a week. Sometimes I write every day for a month. But that to me is a way in the morning to start fresh. I think during COVID, it was hard because I'll be honest, at night I would have a glass of wine every night until I realized this is not good. So it's about acknowledging that I've been making bad choices. Now let's do something new. So I traded it for going to the gym more often, and like realizing when you have too much time on your hands, it's easy to fall down a rabbit hole of negative. So I think eating healthy, getting enough sleep, like these are all cliches probably, but trying to journal when you need to, being grateful for what you have, trying not to feel guilty for being grateful for what you have, which sounds crazy, but it's so true. And for me, it's really been getting back to the basics. So like I said, I played sports since I was a child. Athletics are where I calm down. If I go for a run, it helps clear my mind. If I go to the gym and I'm sore, that's like when I feel empowered. When I feel strong and mentally and physically, I'm able to be a better person at work. I'm a better person around the family. So I think that's been my thing. It's getting back to the work, getting back to myself, allowing myself to say, hey, look, I need time for me. You don't always have to give, because sometimes the biggest gift you can give someone else is to come to the table as the best person you can be.
So true, because if you, and it said earlier that if you don't fill up, and I'm such a big believer in that, we have to give to ourselves, because if we don't, it's like the analogy of the bank account, right? We're constantly making withdrawals and withdrawals and withdrawals, but if we don't make deposits into ourselves, then we overdraw, and then our and then our husband, our spouse,
Mhm.
significant other, children are like, what is wrong with mom? Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, basically. And you don't have to feel guilty about it. It's important. Self-care is a big term lately. I think it's silly that we call it self-care. It is what it is, but I don't think it should be something you're always trying to do. And whatever it is for you, like maybe your self-care is going in the backyard and digging a giant hole with a backhoe, like I did as a child. Like maybe that's what calms you. Maybe it's cooking. Like, oh, my COVID thing was sourdough bread.
Ooh.
Like I discovered this, I don't have any yeast. And I was like in this moment where I'm like, I'd been baking and it made me feel good. And I was calm. I wasn't thinking about anything. And I ran out of, there was no yeast in the stores. And I'm like, what am I going to do? So I created my own sourdough starter, and I made the family sourdough bread from scratch every week. And most people would be like, what? Who would do that? But it calmed me. So that was another thing. Like just pick something, like, I don't know, it can be anything, and that can be your moment. Maybe it's yoga, maybe it's making bread, maybe it's making, I don't know, crafts. Like just do something for yourself, even if it's just 5 minutes in the morning.
The more we can control, the more we can ground ourselves. Actually, it opens up the pathway to creativity and connection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right. So your final thoughts. I always say, this is like your soapbox. What do you want people to know, to hear? What are your final thoughts?
My final thoughts. We've just talked about a lot, but I think what I want people to hear is, I think number one, don't judge each other and don't judge yourself. We're all going through hard times, and it's okay to say, I'm not on the top of my game. I'm not feeling good. Like, I don't feel good about where I am. But realizing you're not alone in that. So you're never alone. There's always someone you can talk to. Feels like there should always be someone. You might not want to. It might be super uncomfortable. It might be like when Mary says, you want to come speak on Facebook Live, and you're like, are you kidding me? I'm scared. Let's do it. It's acknowledging that when you need something, don't keep it inside, and don't think that people aren't there for you, and don't ever think you're the only person going through whatever it is you are. I can guarantee you, whatever you're going through, someone else is going through that and worse. Through COVID, I had quite a few friends who suddenly were diagnosed with cancer. Talk about putting life into perspective. Like there's always something worse, and I think that's it. Don't take yourself too seriously, and don't keep it inside. And for God's sake, like if you're awesome and you should be out there shining, do it. Just do it.
This is so good. And I just hear this, run to the roar, right? No,
Yeah.
lean into those things that make you feel uncomfortable and just do it. I have
Just do it.
someone that just put in here, I just tuned in late. I was in a work meeting, but wow, did I come in at the right time? Going to listen to the whole thing on my drive home.
Oh gosh. Well, thank you, everyone. Yeah, I think this was one of the moments where I was so excited because I was waiting for Mary to ask me, type of thing. But when she did, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't be as fantastic as all the speakers you've had before. That's where I was like, but why not? So that's kind of what my closing comments are. Like, you can be whatever you want to be.
Yes.
Just do it.
When we compare ourselves to other people, we steal our own joy. We all have, that's why I love this platform, because I want your message. Every single person has a message. They have a strength. They have something that they're supposed to give to this world. And absolutely, when you were saying leading from the bench, I can correlate that to so many elements of my life. And I know that it really connects with so many people in their lives, that it doesn't matter where we're at. It doesn't matter if we're in the field playing the game, or if we're on the bench, we're still part of the team. and we need the support. We can't all have people playing and not supporting. There's different levels, there's different seasons, there's different times. And your topic is absolutely relevant. And I am just so honored to know you. You look amazing, by the way. And
Thank you.
thank you for showing up. Thank you for being that leader that people absolutely respect, because you are. You lead from the front. You're one that leads from the back. You lead from the side. You lead from the bench. And we need more leaders like you, Karyn.
Well, thank you, Mary. And thanks everyone who tuned in. I can't see you on here, but thank you. And for those who watch this later, if you have any questions and you know me personally, like I said, communication, can talk to me anytime.
Megan says, love you, Karyn. Great mom, wife, work leader, all while staying real and down to earth. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you again. And next week we have Eric, and he's going to be talking about the power of controlling the ego so that we can be more of a mindful leader, which goes back into even your topic, right? It doesn't matter what role we play, we have to be there authentically. Yvette says, impressive interview, spoken from the heart. Thank you so much. Absolutely. Thank you, Karyn. Thank you everyone for watching.